Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and whether cardboard could ever be an effective material for building trains. At a corner table by the fire are two people. One of them is asking if anyone else sees that unicorn and dinosaur standing outside the window. And that's me, Matthew Mellema. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. So, listeners of the pod will quite possibly remember that we've done quite a few episodes about picture books for young children. If you'd like a refresher on some of those shows, go back and listen to our interview with Danielle Hitchens from Catechesis Books or Natasha Kennedy from the Fat Cat book series. And listeners will inescapably recall that we've done a lot of stuff about middle grade books. Perhaps one reason is because I happen to write middle grade fiction myself, and therefore have pretty strong opinions on the value of the genre. Perhaps. So you can go back and listen to interviews with S.D. Smith, Andrew Peterson, Millie Florence, Meredith Davis, and many others. So we've talked a lot about picture books, so from like young child to like age 5. And then we have the middle grade, which is like age 11-ish through young teen. You may have noticed a missing middle in those demographics. What about the kids in between, the ones between, say, age 6 and age 10? Well, the industry term for these books, according to the internet, is chapter books. They're often some of the first real books that kids will read all on their own. And that's one of the reasons why they are super important. So that's one of the big things we'll be talking about on the show today. Our guest, Leilani Mueller, has written a book for just that age group. The book is called All Aboard the Grandparents Express. I've read the book. I think it's great, and I think it's super Anselmy. So, as you can imagine, I'm very excited to talk to Leilani about her book, its themes, its inspirations, and how one goes about writing a good and beautiful book for the very youngest of readers. Leilani Mueller, thank you for joining us at the pub table today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So for the first question, let's start with the elevator pitch, right? That like paragraph pitch that I'm sure your publishers have been telling you to be working on. So, what is your book about?
Yes. So this is something I've been working on and working with. So my book is called All Aboard the Grandparents Express. And when I talk to people about it, I say it in one sense is my love letter to the life that I and my children live. I'm the mother of 5. I'm married to a college professor. We moved from Texas to California for him to get his PhD. Anyway, that's a little tiny bit of backstory. But the story is follows two young siblings. So this is a surprise to you. Sam is actually going to be called Jack, but follows Poppy and Jack um, as they move from California to Texas with their brontosaurus and their unicorn, and they decide once they get to Texas that they are going to build a train to bring their grandparents to visit them whenever the grandparents so desire. And that is the story. It is a story of love and transition and how love persists both near and far. That's the elevator pitch, if you will.
All right. Fantastic job with the elevator pitch. Your publisher would be very proud of you. so
Thank you.
s- so as you hinted, you did very kindly give me an art copy of the book. So there will be some, small changes to the version I read. Let's just talk about it since it's right there on the table. It was Sam, now he's Jack. Why the difference here?
Yeah. Okay. So the names for Poppy and Sam initially actually were inspired. by particular reasons. So poppy was probably fairly self-evident if you went to college in California. California poppies are the state flower. And so I wanted to do like a little homage, if you will, to California. And so I named her Poppy. And then I love Lord of the Rings. Probably many of us who write books from this perspective are formed by our love for Tolkien and Lewis. And so who else but Sam to follow along with my dear sweet little Poppy. However, my publisher discovered that Usborne has a series called Poppy and Sam books, which there's like 80 of them. And so we were like, we could do it. That would be fine. And I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I would just prefer not. And so, we went with Jack for 2 reasons. Jack, again, it's still making a nod to my love for the Inklings. So as you guys probably know, C.S. Lewis is often called Jack, and so Jack, but also some of the friends and, people who we've met here in Texas and who have become dear, almost like family, include a little guy named Jack. And so a little bit of a little bit towards him as well. So there's bits and pieces of these my own children and these kids that I have grown to know and love through my time here. And so there's a little bit about the naming of those kids. There's a further kid who comes, Rose, at the end, so you have to read it and see. But that's also supposed to be. You're supposed to think Yellow Rose of Texas. I don't know. I know Texas bluebonnets are a little bit more prominent, which is why they feature in like the illustrations. But that's that's the other kind of like, I suppose, little hint dropped that shows my appreciation for these two beautiful and very different states.
Bluebonnet would be a much bolder name for a baby than Rose, so I think you made the right call there. So
Right? Here's my daughter Bluebonnet.
there are few things scarier than having a book coming out and then you're like, "Oh, I googled something. Oh no, it's you wouldn't guess what's already been taken randomly." So that was an excellent pivot on your part. So now let's talk about, like I said, the age demographics here. So I would characterize your book in the chapter book genre. So again, roughly 6 to 10 for like the core target readership demographic. So let's first of all make sure, check my work there. Do you agree that that's sort of the core readership? And if so, what led you to choose that particular age group for the book?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna tell you a story. Um, All right. So yes, you are right. 6 to 10 is the core sort of readership for the book. Naturally, I hope that I'm a good children's author and that adults will enjoy reading it as well and that there will be something for anybody who picks it up, but that is up for the public to read and decide. But yes, 6 to 10 was is the demographic. Particularly, well, the little girl is 8 and the little boy is 5. Um which were about the ages of my 2 oldest kids when I started writing the book. And the way the book came about is, well, okay, first of all, let me back up just a little bit further. I love writing and I have loved writing probably since I was in high school, but not as much as my sister, who you may know, Autumn Krause is also a writer and she's a very good writer. Um and I have, I guess, in some ways, told stories with her since she began her writing career. I read all her drafts. This is just something that we do together, or that she does with me. Simultaneously to that, I've been in a writing group probably for the last 15 years where I have done NaNoWriMo, if you guys are familiar with it, which is write a novel in a month. So various different writing projects has just been part of my story. I teach English, I direct theater, telling stories has just been part of who I am. So this is who I am over my past 15 years or so. I am now the mother of 5 children, and I just had given birth to my fifth child, and I see a call for submissions from this press called Cala Press. And I think to myself, you know what? I would really love to write a story for my children. And I don't really want to self-publish. It's just not me, not what I want to do. I like putting my work out and having someone else sort of evaluate it in that sense. And again, I'm like maybe 3 months postpartum at this point and I was like, "You know what? I'm going to submit this story." And I think about it a little bit and about my children and our life, and I thought I would submit. They needed a chapter and a summary. So I gave it some thought. I submitted a chapter and a summary, and 6 months later, I discovered it hadn't sent. And I was like, oh man, that's a bummer. Like, I really thought this was something good here. I'm a little bummed about this. You know what? I'm just gonna like send them an email and ask them if I can resubmit it. And they said yes, which was wonderful because typically, as you probably know, the road to publishing is very rocky. This was not one of those rocky roads. And on my birthday that year, I was offered a publishing contract, which is a year ago. And then this year, the book will be coming out. So that's why that particular age group. Um, I think after writing that, I intend to stick with this age group or middle grade, somewhere between the 2. Um, but in one sense, it was an accident that it happened, but in another sense, I have told stories to children since I used to, again, babysit little kids and tell them yarns, if you will. And so as I wrote this particular story, I actually read each chapter aloud to my children as I was writing it, and they loved it. So I was like, my job's done. In one sense, if the public doesn't like it, it doesn't matter because my children love it and it is for them. And so that is why. So in answer to your question, that is why this particular age group, it was for my kids. This is for my kids and it's for their friends because again, my husband is a philosopher. He got his is in the process of finishing his PhD at Baylor. And Baylor philosophy is a little weird because there are a lot of, at least in our time, there were a lot of families with children, young children. And oftentimes in the world of academia, as you probably know, there's not a lot of families with young children. That's usually something you do single, or maybe you're married or something like that. But that just wasn't the case with my era of Baylor philosopher. I like to say it's because philosophy is the study of wisdom, and wisdom is twofold. It's head and heart, and hands. And we were, our husbands were thinking it, and we were living it out. Um, was my thought. And that is, and that is again why this particular age group and this particular story for these children who have had this experience of most of us who have chosen this route, and there's probably 4 or 5 families, are really close to our wonderful families that are literally spread all over America, and in the case of my husband, Canada. Um, and yet we have felt a call of God to come here to Texas, so that our husband's kid could be educated in a particular way in hopes that they will do good for his kingdom. And caught up in that story is the story of these little children, who are growing up, um, in this environment of, again, far from family but close to dear friends. And so that is the other reason, as I have said a couple times, why this particular age, for this particular book. So I know, long answer for that question, but hopefully that suffices.
Yeah, and I love that answer because honestly, if you go back and look at a lot of the best, children's books throughout history, Winnie the Pooh, The Hobbit, they started off with just a parent telling stories to their kid, right? Like that's one of the reasons why I think books like that tend to stand out and be more original, be more real in a lot of ways. It's because it's not writing for a market, writing for a publisher. It's like, oh, what story would my children like? And then going off of that. And I think that is absolutely the way to go. And let's before we get into the main part of the questions I have for you, though, I do need to address the connection that we have because it's going to sound tenuous, but I find it very real. Because you mentioned your sister, Autumn Kraus. She is, among many other things, a friend of the podcast. She's been on the podcast twice. One of her episodes was tragically lost to a computer malfunction. So it's like the Library of Alexandria, just this lost episode. But we do have one episode with her that stayed on. Listeners, please go back and listen to it. Autumn Kraus, absolutely fantastic author. Like Leilani said, she is doing great stuff right now, especially in the YA demographic. Her husband, Mark, was a good friend of mine from law school. also a philosophy guy. So you
Mhm.
sisters, you go for the philosophers, I guess.
Apparently,
You have a type.
apparently.
So that is really fascinating. So Autumn is the one who introduced us two together. So
Mhm.
when you put it that way, it's logical, right? You're my law school roommate's wife's sister. Come on,
There you
it's like
go.
the most obvious thing in the
We're
world.
meant to be friends.
So I love that origin story again. I think that's the way to go about it. You write for your kids, you write for the people who you love, give them a story that they love, and then sort of unleash it on the world. So I love that approach to it. So now let's talk about the logistics because I wrote a middle grade book, which should sound pretty similar, but it was actually a lot different because my first person narrator was 14 years old, but the narration is coming from like an older, like the grown up man looking back on
Mhm,
himself, right? So it's like a man writing about his memories as a 14-year-old, which is way easier than what you did because your narrator is an 8-year-old girl and it's told like immediately, like it's what she's
mhm,
experiencing. You're inside her head. So that seems pretty tough. How did you go
mhm.
about doing that?
Yeah. So I think I agree with you. Um, it is pretty tough. The way I went about doing it is I hang out with a lot of 8-year-old girls. so that is how I went about it. A lot of the story is just inspired by the fact that much of my time again as a homeschool mother is spent at this point with a lot of elementary school kids and younger at my yeah and younger. So I was thinking actually a little bit about that question because I think you had added when you sent the question to me, like what is difficult about writing from this particular perspective. um and I think one difficulty is actually keeping the word choice for her, the word choice of an 8-year-old girl. And I probably fudged that a little bit. Again, the 8-year-olds I hang out with have philosophers for dads and readers for mothers, and so their language, their vocabulary is maybe a little bit more copious than your average 8-year-old girl. So it is 100% possible that Poppy is using words or thinking words that not all 8-year-old girls say, but I don't know. I bet your own kids also surprise you with words that will just pop out of their mouth in the correct usage. And so that was one of the difficulties, and I definitely did have to simplify some of that down as I was going through the editing process with her, because again, she is 8. She's a precocious 8-year-old, but she is 8. Um, and so, uh, building and making her life though was again mostly just based on observation and experience. The conflicts and the drama of her little life were inspired by conflicts and drama that I've seen happen. The tragedy for kids, like little kids, is so, I mean, here's a tragedy for a 3-year old. You built a tower and his 1-year-old little sister knocked it over. The world is about to end. And if you can, like, put some of that real tragedy and those real stakes that this child feels into a story, I think it makes it more believable. And that is what I attempted to do with Poppy. They you'll have to read the story to see what happens, but there is real tragedy in the life of a child that happens in the story. Um and I wanted that to be the case because I wanted readers, to see this little girl, um, come to grips and come to deal with difficult situations that are real in a little girl or a little boy's life. And again, the way I sort of went about that is via experience, is watching these little children in my life, interacting with them, trying to parent them with wisdom, and to do all that. The other aspect of writing her perspective is I wanted it to be clear that it wasn't just her in the world. I wanted her world to be fuller. Like, I wanted you to see through her that there was adults in the world and that you can maybe guess what some of the adult struggles were. So the mom is expecting. And one thing I've really appreciated about my own little girl and other little girls that I know is they are like a little bit aware of like, oh, maybe mom's extra tired because she's expecting a baby or something like that. And I wanted some of that to be in the story too, so that when when someone listens to or reads, maybe reads aloud to their child this book, I wanted the adults to be able to recognize themselves in the story. So when the child is having their particular tragedies that come about via a storm, I wanted adults to think about, like, oh, what other things might this storm have caused that would have been maybe the same sort of tragedy? And I don't know, maybe there's an element as we learn to trust and know God where we look at the children's tragedies and think, "Hey, sweetie, that's really not that bad. Like it's going to be okay." Maybe the same thing's true of us. Maybe God looks at us and says, "Hey, honey, um it's not that bad. You'll be okay." And so I wanted that too, but I needed that through her eyes. And so that was how I approached that aspect.
So the thing you said about the diction and the word choice for the 8-year-old and maybe just sort of slightly ratcheting it up, that I think that is totally the right call. That makes total sense. I It's like an interview I saw with John Green, the YA author, and he was talking about his dialogue,
Yeah.
and he says, "I write dialogues. It's not how real teens talk; it's how real teens think they talk." So that there, it's a little bit stylized, but still keeping it real, and I think that's the right way to go about it. And I love what you said about the tragedies through the lens of an 8-year-old girl. You were so effective with that. And again, I won't give spoilers, but there's this one part. Uh, right before the final act where this big project that the girl's been working on, something bad happens to it. And the reader can like figure out like, oh no. Does that mean that, oh no? And I remember thinking that as I'm reading, it's like, oh, the project's destroyed. And it's a good job of getting in the head of the 8-year-old. And you are so right. There is this thing any parent or anybody who spends time with like their niece or nephew, friends, kids will be able to say it's like, this will happen to my 6-year-old. He'll be building these huge magnetile towers, and he'll get so into it, and it'll knock over, and he's just like, "No!" Just listen from the depths of his soul, where it's on the one hand, it's like, "Oh, buddy, it's not a big deal. It's real. It doesn't matter." But then it's like, it is a big deal to him. So just trying to parent it through him is a delicate balance. And speaking of ways to parent through this story, I was really struck by the presence of the imaginary friends. So each of the kids has an imaginary friend. Jack has an imaginary brontosaurus, and Poppy has an imaginary unicorn, and they just exist in the story. There's no real explanation for them. They're just sort of plopped down there, and the reader just needs to like roll with it, right? Which I really loved. So, what was the inspiration for giving them these very real to them imaginary friends in the context of a story that's realistic otherwise?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a good question. And as a side note, I you recently posted something about Brontosaurus being back in the dinosaur canon. I was recently telling a former student about this story, and he was like, "Brontosaurus is not in anymore." I was like, "No, please no." And I went and looked it up, and I was like, "Phew, glad Brontosaurus is in," because this was another one of we call him Bronte in the story, because I love the Bronte sisters, and so that's my other like nod to literature, and so I needed him to be a Brontosaurus, and so I'm glad that the Brontosaurus is again back in the dinosaur canon. Okay. So, one thing I absolutely love about children is their vivid imaginations and how the real and the pretend, those just intermix. Especially I'd say below the age of 7. I think or maybe even 6. I think as they get a little bit older than that, they start there's a more clearer demarcation, even though they're still able to enter these games of pretend. But I wanted to show the vividness of a child's imagination and like the wonder that a child's imagination puts into their world. Because I think they do look at the world with wonder. And this was one way of going about it. Another thing that I really wanted to do is I wanted to provide for the arcing theme of the story, this ability to show that like the kids were in one sense being very interior to themselves. These imaginary creations were creatures created by themselves, um for this brother and this sister, and they were in it together, if you will. And one of the things that you need to learn as you come to a new place, or you are part of a new community, is what from yourself has to like be appropriately let go, um and also what from yourself has to have others be included in that. And so if as you read the story, you will probably see at different moments that these imaginary creatures um become in one sense symbolic of play, and like the ability for people to kind of join together in community. Um but there's also, I would suggest, the train as like a third imaginary creature, if you will. um and I purposely, played with what happened with those by the end of the story to sort of show that the children had, though they have retained their imagination, have moved into, an acceptance of their new reality that is good, that is really good. So again, so the choice for these imaginary creatures was to showcase the imagination and wonder of children, but also to use it a little bit as a story device. Hopefully not obtusely. I wanted it to be natural to the story, but if one was to like look at the story, hopefully from a more literary lens, hopefully one would be able to see that it was authorial intent, or I started pulling apart that imaginary construction to tell, I think, hopefully a deeper story. That was the intent. Again, that's up for readers to read and judge, but that is what I was attempting um with that.
It reminds me of what Bill Watterson did with Calvin and Hobbes, because he was asked a lot,
Mm,
well, Hobbes, is he really a stuffed tiger who comes to life to a real tiger? Or is it just in Calvin's imagination? And
mhm.
Watterson's response was, not only am I not going to give you an answer, I'm going to be purposely vague in avoiding an answer. He just said, well, he's Hobbes is one thing to Calvin and he's another thing to everyone else, and that's the only answer you're going to get, right? He's leaving intentionally vague to sort of leave that play in the joints for the child's imagination. I feel like you're doing something very similar with that,
Yes.
where it's basically like, yeah, the two kids, the brontosaurus and the unicorn, they are real to them. Parents don't see them, but it's just that's just how it is, and that's something that you use with a lot of authorial intent throughout the story. So now let's get to another place where you showed your author's intent, and that is with the themes. You've touched on this already, but the big thing that happens is that the family moves from California, where, among other things, they have the grandparents who live very close and who are very close to the kids. And then they move to Texas, where, among other things, the grandparents are very far away and the kids are dealing with that. So, how would you want this book to be used in a way that would help share that theme with a lot of kids who would be able to relate to it in some way? Do you picture sort of parents and kids reading it together, talking about? Do you picture kids sort of reading this as their big chapter book on their own and dealing with it? How would you feel that the themes of this story could be best shared and discussed among the family?
Well, I think I've been taken lately, by this idea of the read aloud. I mean, I know this is again big in the homeschooling circles. You have like the read aloud revival, which has again been big for a while. I'm currently reading my kids' Charlotte's Web, which I think also does this whole what's real with the animals and what's not real,
Mhm.
which I think is great in children's literature. Um, and and I think because of the language choice, in unless it's a precocious reader, which there are some, um, I think it would be delightful for a parent to read it out loud to their children. Maybe their 5 and 6-year-olds, and to just enjoy it. I think oftentimes children pick up a lot more than we expect them to. I recall reading my Felicity, my oldest daughter, a fairy tale by Tolkien called Leaf by Niggle, which if you haven't read, everyone should read it because it's fantastic. And there was a moment, she was 5 years old, and at the end, she was like, "God made the tree real." And I was like, "You're 5. How did you get that?" Um, but it's really beautiful, and I think the best stories are stories that we can give to a kid, and they are formed by them without, in one sense, over talking them. if that makes sense. Like in this particular story, I would hope that a kid would be a little braver, a little grittier, a little more open to friendship, a little more okay with the fact that change happens, but that it can be magical. But I don't know if that always needs to be said, or maybe it just needs to be said with wisdom. Um, or like a reminder. I don't know. We've also done the SD Smith books, and so ever so often, my son, we will remind him like, "Hey, oh, be brave like Pickett." Or I was thinking even of your book, "Have integrity like Carthus," or something like that at the end, like with these kind of images or something like that. But you can't really have that image unless you've read the whole story, and that story has to like be in you. So what would I recommend? I would say I hope that parents read it out loud to their children and enjoy the experience and maybe see themselves and their children in the experience. I think that older readers would enjoy it. The 8-year-old, the 7, 8-year-old readers who are who are just ready to take off with reading because sometimes that's what happens. They're 6 and a half and they can do Harry Potter, but maybe you don't want to give them Harry Potter quite yet. This would be a good this would be a good book for them. Um, this would be yeah, I hope a good book for readers of that sort. I hope it would fall into I'm not as good as her, but like a Sarah Plain and Tall um or like A Tale of Despero or these stories that are like written for younger children, but are talking about real themes. And you want to like just present it to the child so that they can take it and make it part of themselves. So I guess both and Matt. The parents should read it to the kids, and the advanced readers should read it to themselves. Um, I will have to like take a showcase of my like 11, 12, 13-year-old readers that I know to see what they end up thinking of it. They'll read it because they know me, but I'll have to see what they think of it after they've read it.
That is just the right answer. Both. Why not both? Or kids, why not read it with your parents, then read it on your own? You can do both. Come on, come on. But so final set of questions for you because we are running low on time. Because big theme of this book, moving from California
Mhm.
to Texas. You have spent time living in both California and Texas, so give me the notes. What are the things you love about California? What are the things you love about Texas? Oh, she is staring off into
You
the
know what's
distance, gathering
interesting?
her thoughts.
Yeah.
This is
I
the
know.
big closing question.
Place Yeah, I think place has been important to me. I also lived in England for a year of my undergraduate, and so place is very important. And even in Texas, I live in Houston now, but I moved to Waco first. Things I love about California. I don't think I realized how beautiful California was as a state until I moved away from it.
Mm.
And then I realized, wow, California is a beautiful state. I think sometimes acquaintance with something can make you not realize. Again, it's wonder. I naturally love that my family's in California. My baby sister's getting married this summer. Baby sister, she's in her 30s now, and we're going back for the wedding. So I love being close to my family. Um, I love I love the smaller pace of life in Texas, particularly when we lived in Waco. I felt like we were really able to my family was very much able to sort of become a little family unit there in ways that I think were really special. And there's a moment, there's a Thanksgiving moment in my book, and that is actually also a moment that is based a little bit in real life. We had a little tiny house, but we had a garage and we strung it with lights and we had Thanksgiving dinner in the garage, with a bunch of friends spread out on like rickety tables, and it was just perfect. Um, and I think those moments and experiences, which aren't just unique to Texas, they happen in other states as well, have been particularly prominent in my experience in Texas. I also love the bluebonnets. Texas in the spring is where it's at. Southern California all year long, guys. When they talk about $1 million weather, that's where it's at. But Texas in the spring is beautiful. Um, for sure.
All right. Well, I will also note when I lived in Southern California, I thought it was hilarious how people would pretend there were seasons. Like you'd see people like wearing jackets in the autumn and winter. It's like, guys, it's 65, 70 degrees all year round. You don't but they need to pretend, right? So we'll give them that.
Matt, it wasn't
But
pretend. Like when you live there, you really get cold in the 60s and you really get hot in the 80s. I did not understand this truth until I moved. And then I realized, oh, your body adapts to be really hot. Like it was probably something like maybe 90 today. And I was like, oh, it's nice out. I could be outside.
look
Um,
at you acclimating.
I'm
That's
I'm getting to
amazing.
be a Texan now. It's in a lot of ways. Um, but yeah, but for the Californians, there's a small range in which they are comfortable. If it gets out of that range, it's you got to have that jacket.
Well, whether you are in California or Texas or somewhere else entirely, definitely please check this book out. Again, Leilani Mueller. The book is All Aboard the Grandparents Express. Leilani, where can we find you? Where can we find your writing?
So at the moment, the best place to find me is on Instagram. I will eventually have an author page, but right now, Instagram Lay Ray Writes is the place to find me. Um, and it's coming out from Calipress, so I suppose also there. It will be coming out in pre-orders. I think are in August, and then September it comes into the world. So it's kind of exciting. It's very exciting, I should say. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, I will definitely be keeping a lookout for this. Again, I'm so excited about it. Leilani, thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, as you can probably tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have an extra, maybe 30 or so seconds to spare right now, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.